Hi, my name is Don Woods. I'm the associate pastor at the new Eagle Worldwide Ministries Covenant Church called Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is a new church we're birthing in the Port Dover, Ontario area. I just wanted to let you know a bit about myself, tell you a bit about myself and what God's done in my life. I've been an ordained minister for 12 years, working as a pastor in different capacities for those 12 years. But it wasn't always that way. I came out of a life of drug abuse and alcohol abuse. There was a time in my life where I was had abuse with alcohol and drugs for over 20 years. I was a drug dealer for actually 20 years of my life, and I was in organized crime for 12 of those years. I spent over 4.5 years in jail on different occasions. And then my life became one big mess. I was losing everything. There was a time in my life where I was making a whole pile of money, and then it started to diminish. I owned a couple of businesses, and then I owned a couple of restaurants in the Ottawa area. And what happened was, when you're in the bar and restaurant business and you're an alcoholic, it just doesn't work. So I ended up in the restaurant business, bar business, and I was drinking every day and doing about $500 a day of cocaine. And what happened was that I lost everything. I lost my businesses, I lost my family. And not long ago, but back in 1995, I rode into Toronto, Ontario, Canada on a bicycle, and everything I owned was on that bicycle. I actually lived in a tent that leaked, and I had to build the tent underneath a bridge. Otherwise, if it rained that night, I'd wake up in a puddle. Eventually, what happened is I graduated to welfare, and I got a room. And so I'll tell you, after living in a tent that leaked, that room was like the Taj Mahal. And so my brother, which was in business with me and also in organized crime with me, was in the same boat. We had both lost everything, and we both end up in Toronto living in rooms, both on welfare, a far cry from the money we were making as drug dealers. And one day, I just got sick and tired of being sick and tired. I went over to my brother's room, and I was sitting in his room. As he was flipping through the TV channels, I said to my brother John, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And he said, well, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired also. Meanwhile, he's flipping through the TV, and this preacher comes on TV and says, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Well, we were so desperate, we started answering the TV. We said, yes, we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And he said, well, pray this prayer. Now, we've prayed hundreds of those prayers, but this time we were desperate and we meant it. And so we started praying this prayer, and we closed our eyes to pray the prayer. And what happened is when we opened our eyes, the room was filling up with a glory cloud. What I mean by a glory cloud, it looked like someone had stuck a smoke machine in the window of the room, and the room was filling up with smoke. It looked like we were sitting in a steam bath, except that the air glistened. What happened was we both started crying profusely, and we were just desperately sobbing. I don't mean just crying a few tears. I mean sobbing right from our stomach. And so we'd never cried in front of each other before. We were always playing that macho man image, you know. And so he threw me a towel, and he grabbed a towel. We just buried our faces in these towels and just started crying. When we took the towels away, we couldn't even see each other anymore. The whole room had filled up with like a steam bath, like smoke, and it was glistening. And it started to get on us. And when it got on us, it started being like waves of electricity running through our bodies. Waves of electricity. Then we took the towels away again, and we started laughing hilariously. We started laughing so much that our jaws and our stomachs were getting sore. And meanwhile, the waves of electricity were still going through us. But we got so scared that we ran out of the room. We ended up running right out of the room because, today I would have stayed there and parked myself there because I understand what was happening. But back then we didn't know what was happening. We ran out of that room. It was midnight on August 27, 1995. We started wandering the streets of Toronto. We wandered the streets of Toronto till 5 in the morning, roughly 5 hours. At the end of that 5 hours, both of us were just walking down the street, and at the same time, this thing lifted off us like a blanket. When it lifted off us like a blanket, every single addiction that held us bound for all those years, 20 years, lifted off with it. We were both completely 100% set free at that moment. The next day, we had a Christian background, so the next day, we went out and bought Bibles. And so we bought these Bibles, And once we started reading the Bible, we knew then that we had to find a church. Once we found the church, then we wanted to know how to plug into that church. Well, we just started volunteering at the church. Eventually what happened is I got a job at the church as the maintenance man. And so now I was on staff at a large church in Toronto. And that was one of the best things that happened to me because I was in that environment. It kept me in that environment. I was a bit of a bubble for me. And so what eventually happened was I got raised up in that church. One of the things we had with the access of being on staff in that church, we were able to read all the books that were in the bookstore. We had free access to the bookstore, and we had allowance for books to buy every month. So I lived in a room, and I bought books, and I listened to tapes, and this went on for months, and it became my own private Bible school. One day we were walking home, and I found a little TV, and when I took the TV, it didn't have a cord on it. It was like a radio. And so I put a cord on it, and I plugged it into the wall. And when I turned it on, I only got one channel, and it was a 24-hour Christian TV channel. So between my books, between this little TV, and between my Bible, I was in that room for roughly 2 years. It became my Bible school. And so the Holy Spirit would visit me in that room, and he started to raise me up. Well, now I was hanging around the church so much, I had a desire to be a pastor. And so I had this desire to be a pastor. Well, I heard that God gives us the desires of our hearts. So eventually what happened was I became an ordained minister. No Bible school. My Bible school was the Holy Spirit in a room with books, tapes, and a little TV. And so after I became a pastor, I started working in different capacities. I worked in an actually Spanish-English church in Toronto. Then I worked in a larger church in Toronto that was an international church, and I learned a lot there. And then, you know, just because my life was turned around and I was out of the darkness into the light, I still had my issues. My family was completely restored back to me. Everything I'd ever lost was restored back to me after that glory cloud experience. But what happened was 4 years after my family was restored back to me, my wife died of cancer. And so it left me with 3 children, 10, 12, and 14. So it wasn't life without problems. It's just that I had the problem solver living in me and with me. And so from that point on, I was pastoring. Everything was going good. Once I lost my wife, I had to get remarried, which was pretty prophetic, because before my wife passed away, she said to me, she called one of her girlfriends in the room and she said, "You're going to marry my husband and take care of my kids." Now that lady thought that she had done too much morphine. But when she started thinking about it, the Lord started to move on her. And exactly what my wife prophesied before she passed away, this lady did. She married me and took care of my children. And so what happened was we started pastoring. But then we had a dry spell in our pastorate. And we ended up leaving that church, and we went through a season of a sifting season. And it was like we were dry bones. And so we were thinking, well, maybe we should be running away from the church. Maybe we're supposed to get back into business or something. But one day the Lord said to me, "Don, the thing that you're running from is the thing that you should be running to." And so we decided, okay, Lord, you've got a ministry job for us, and it's in the church. And so we said, well, we need to get some confirmation. We need to find out. So we just thought, we heard about a tent in Copetown, Ontario. Eagle Worldwide Ministries had a tent. We're having tent meetings 7 nights a week in Copetown, Ontario. And we decided, let's go to this tent. It was kind of a last-ditch effort to see if God could speak to us. We got to that tent, and we were the only ones in the tent. And I said to the lady, "Where can we sit?" The lady said, "You can sit right here in the front if you're pastors." And we said, "Well, we're pastors." But what she didn't know is we were pastors with dry bones. Well, the meeting started, and this gentleman named Dr. Russ Moyer came out, and he looked right at myself and my wife, and he started prophesying into our life. He told us our past, he told us our present, and he told us our future. And I'm telling you, just like it says in Ezekiel, these dry bones were prophesied over, and they came instantly alive. My wife and I drove home that night knowing that we were called back into the full-time ministry. We knew that we were connected to Eagle Worldwide Ministries, and we knew that God had something in Eagle Worldwide Ministries for us. And like I started out to say, now we're just birthing a brand new church called Saturday Night Live in the Port Dover area, and my wife and I are the associate pastors. So I just wanted you to let you know a bit about my background. So sometimes I look a little squeaky clean, but it hasn't always been squeaky clean. But thanks to God, He's cleaned the whole mess that I made up.